Travis Wayne Goodsell, video request on Hugh Nibley. So Hugh Nibley is, even still after his death, a prominent Mormon. Has Apologetics for Mormonism pretty much use him for all of their fallacy arguments, falsehoods. Apologetics is incorrectly defined by Oxford Dictionary on Google search as reasoned arguments or writings in justification of something, typically a theory or religious doctrine. And if you don't understand how that is wrong, you can't put science and religion or logical Socratic methodology and religion in the same sentence, as if they're one and the same. Religion is anti-science. Religion is anti-logic. And so when you're claiming Christianity, which the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints claims to be, you are not being reasonable. You are not being logical. You are not developing theories at all. You are making claims based on falsehoods, called fallacy arguments. You can't use them. So, yeah, there is no debate with somebody who's religious. They automatically lose. And yet, that hasn't stopped apologists from continuing to threaten people, to gaslight people into accepting their religious beliefs as being true. Such is the case with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They have the BYUs, but they are using psychology, not just religion, to destroy the scientific education of the students. And Hugh Nibley was a big part of the indoctrination of Mormons through apologetics of the church. And so he was mostly in the 1950s and 60s when he did his most abominable works. The church used that because he was loyal to the church. He don't think it was, well, it could have been Nibley rather than Skousen. One of them had a film strip of their vacation down to south of the border, of slide presentations of the pyramids down there, and claiming that it's proof that the Book of Mormon is true. No. Fallacy argument. And so, yeah, they were distractions away from church history. As, was it 62 or 68? New York Times, Book of Abraham. Museum walls proclaim fraud of Mormon prophet. Get this. Seriously? Scribbed? They're good. Hey, Jesse. I've been watching Jessie for a long time. She got hit by the hurricanes years ago and had to do some recovery. Okay. God. Alright, where were we? Hugh Nibley. And so, yeah, I didn't even see the date. Oh my hell. Yeah, it's blurry and it's not allowing me to see a date. This may not even be the New York Times because it has some differences from the other one on the other file that I have. September 35689, one of those. And then, I don't know, it could be 78. Regardless of that failure. And so, yeah, the scholars for the church who don't use scholarship based on science were called up to defend the church. Because the prophets don't do anything with translation. They deny the power and authority thereof. Just like the Methodist preacher to Joseph Smith. And so, there's a lot of diversionary arguments used in apologetics. Non sequiturs, red herrings, and when all else fails, the most common one by Mormons who aren't Mormon scholars, the ad hominem, the abusive comments. Well, you're stupid. You're an anti-Mormon, antichrist core whore, so we shouldn't listen to you. I'm abused by Mormons who do that. And so when Mormons leave the church then bullies the people who leave the church by telling Mormons they left the church because their feelings were hurt. And so Mormons prey upon those who leave the church with those ad hominem attacks. Because the church is abusive bullies, threatening Mormons to stay in the church with threats of violence and hatred and the wrath of Jesus rather than the love of Jesus, and trying to threaten those who leave. Which, if you're threatening somebody who's left the church, they're stupid if they come back to their abuser. So yeah, Hugh Nibley was an abusive person, abusive personality, a Nazi authoritarian. because that's how the church raises its men and women. And so, studying is not really studying. Studying the Book of Mormon is not, 1 Nephi chapter 1 verse 2, Jewish religion. Let's find out what the Jewish religion and see where it's mentioned in the Book of Mormon. 2 Nephi chapter 3, about Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David. That's interesting. It says that Joseph Smith Jr. is Messiah ben Joseph, and he's going to prepare the way for the latter-day coming of Messiah ben David. And that's why he set up temples and set up the rituals and started the church and was murdered by the enemy, and who usurped his church and replaced it, just like Christians did to the Jews. Nope, can't do that. That would prove the church wrong. And so, you need to come up with other distractions away from that. And so when the footnoting was first done for the 1981 edition of the Quad, you don't see a footnote to learning of the Jews. And if you go to section 107, verse 92, can you guess which one is not footnoted? The whole list, even the summation of the list, is footnoted, except for one item. Can you see which one it is? Not only did they not footnote section 91, or verse 91, to 3 Nephi, let alone section 103, verse 16, yeah, these are the kind of underhanded, malicious tactics that apologists use to protect and defend the church as Christian with the name Jesus for the Christ. It's called lying and deceiving. And Mormons who fall for this con are now weaponized to do the same thing that apologists do, to bully other people with lies and deceptions and religious freedom threats to accept the lies. And if you look up apologetic, which is blue highlighted, it's claiming that it goes back to the Christians who were called Christian apologists. Yeah, this is post-Constantine. It is not pre-Constantine. Any writer pre-Constantine is not Christian. And here's a clue. Christianity was created 325 CE under Roman Emperor Constantine with the first creed of Christianity. That's why it's called the first creed of Christianity, is because Christianity was first created with the first creed of Christianity. It did not exist before because there are no previous creeds of Christianity, because the first creed of Christianity is the Nicene Creed of Constantine, 325 CE. Notice it's not the Roman period time where Jesus supposedly was literal history true. These are the kinds of diversionary distractions that Christians, and thus the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints apologists, use to get you arguing over absurd issues rather than the core issue which shuts down the whole argument from the beginning. You're not true. You're lying. And so Hugh Nibley was long-winded, many publications. And so when he was old enough to retire, he was put on emeritus status and given a room at BYU. And so he would pretty much do lectures, but they didn't really count as credit hours. It was just something for people to attend and listen to him while he works on his next book of babbling. The Book of Babel. His books literally are worthless. Worthless. I bought one because of the pictures. You know, like Playboy. You don't get it for the articles. Duh. And so, yes, the pictures are actual, legitimate, factual, ancient pictures. But his comments on it is crap. And so, yeah, despite the popularity among Mormonism, and especially Mormon apologists, whatever name they're calling themselves these days, because Nelson sort of screwed up the latest name that they had. Oh, dear God. And so, yeah, I'm seeing under Hugh Nibley some errors of the name. LDS Church Magazines, LDS Mission. And the is not capitalized. You know, it's too easy to mock what is corrupt. Mormons don't understand this. They attack me to protect the church when they are being humiliated because the church is conning them. And so there was a big difference. You know, he got a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. In 1938. Wilford Griggs? Is that? Did he? I think that's... Yeah, Wilford Griggs. Yep. He also is Mormon. He's been able to be more popular than other apologists. Yeah. Griggs was educated at BYU and Stanford University. Griggs received his PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. And you'll never guess when. They don't tell you when. That's interesting. Why not? Because my dad was there. He and his wife and my dad and wife, mom, whatever they're called, were their contemporary. So they know each other. Being among the few Mormons that were there in 69, 70, 71, depending on when my brother, because my brother was born in November 24th, 71, and so he moved to Michigan sometime after, so he would have graduated. And so if in November he would have still been at Berkeley, so he would have still continued to go on into the next semester. And so probably by the summer after graduating with a master's at Berkeley, whereas Wilford Griggs was getting a PhD at the University of California, Berkeley. So yeah, he's written books, Early Egyptian Christianity from its origins to 451 CE, which is all crap. Sorry, Griggs. My dad knew of his being at BYU and arranged for me to go with my dad to a lecture at BYU so that we would make contact with Griggs, and that's how I found out that they know each other. So that my dad could discourage me from pursuing Egyptian. Thanks, Dad. See, when I was a baseball player, as a little kid, my dad told me that there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that I'll ever make it into the professional leagues, and so why bother trying? Do something more productive with your life. I'm a kid! It's sports! I'm athletic! To, be physically fit and growth development and stuff. And still, nonetheless, I then go on into basketball, and it turns out, after my graduation was up, and I'm at the final ceremony after the season, my senior year, and the coach gets up and talks about me and is pissed. That I've got the talent to get into the NBA, as they put in other guys into the Laker organization, and I'm wasting my time by going to Rick's College. Well, my dad said, and so yeah, why try? My dad says I won't become anything. I'm good for nothing. And so yeah, when he found out that I was now pursuing research into the learning of the Egyptians, language of the Egyptians, as I had already deciphered Paleo-Hebrew, and they helped my wife at the time leave, as she didn't want her kids learning Hebrew. He had found an online program back in the AOL days of disk, phone line, internet, to take a test to see how well you know Egyptian. And he failed, so obviously I'm going to fail. And so he had me take the test, and he hovered over to watch to see how I would do, and it seemed to take forever, but finally, in the end, 100%. And so I'm not sure whether that was pre or post Wilford Griggs to try to discourage me from being like Indiana Jones, which my dad probably thought was similar to what inspired me to pursue that, but regardless, he also told me, he discouraged me from becoming an Indiana Jones. You do understand that archaeology is not like that. Dear God. So anyway, yeah, we've got a bunch of scholars during this same time period. My dad being of the later ones with Wilford Griggs, as Nibley obviously, it was 1910, and Griggs and my dad were in the 1940s when they were born. Dear God, nightmares all. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. there's nothing really to talk about here. You get an education at a church school, and it's worthless because you've been taught falsehoods. Whether it's psychology imposed into the sciences, where instead of calculus physics for astronomy, you're now using feelings. Well, what do you feel like? How does space make you feel? Very good. You graduate with a PhD because you participated. Good for you. Oh, we don't want to give you a test because you might get stressed. So yeah, religion and psychology are both anti-science. And so they need to be removed from our education. And Christianity, dear God, the abominations and horrors that it's caused over the millennia, centuries since Constantine. As I think we're still in the anniversary, didn't it go into August? Yeah, May to August. Next year is the 1700th anniversary. And so this year is the 1699th anniversary. And so, yeah, many expo nevermos get suckered in debating Mormon apologists with these diversionary topics, rather than going right to the core. 1 Nephi chapter 1 verse 2, it says it's the religion of the Jews, which means the Book of Mormon is prophecy and revelation, and therefore not literal history. And yet, expo nevermos play their game, and everybody agrees to disagree, which is a false dichotomous, it's a false dichotomous argument. But it's also a defeatism in which you just agree that there is no agreement. It's a fallacy. It's wrong. Falsehood. And yet there was a period in American history where that became popular. And you can see it on TV shows during the time period when it became popular to make it more popular. Falsehoods. This is what the scriptures actually talk about by the wisdom of the world. Fallacy. But the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wants to merge the fallacy wisdom of the world with logical Socratic methodology and call it all the same. And thus, you now have conspiracy theories, meaning falsehoods and lies, rather than science-based, logical, Socratic methodology developed theories that are tested for confirmation of fact, i.e. truth. And so also under apologetics, right? Where did I say it? Defending beliefs against critics. No, it's not beliefs that you defend. Claims are what you need to defend, not beliefs. Anybody can believe whatever they want. People are going to consider you cuckoo, but still, you can believe whatever you want. If you believe you're a fairy princess, you're a fairy princess. Okay. whatever you believe. But when you try to enforce that belief on other people, you know, like going to kindergarten and saying, I'm Princess Jasmine. Brittany. No, Princess Jasmine. Then we're starting to get into some problems. It's all fun and games until you start being abusive to other people to accept lies and falsehoods. And so, yeah, some of the popular arguments that most likely could be traced to Nibley are the most recent one that came out is based on Nibley. Saudi Arabia has found plates of records. Well, I guess the Book of Mormon is true, isn't it? No! First of all, when you understand the dating of those those plates, they were more in the medieval time period. Nowhere of Babylonian time period. Second, it doesn't matter what you find that is talked about in the Book of Mormon. You have to actually find the Book of Mormon plates. And, as Joseph Smith says in The Learning of the Jews, Prophecy and Revelation, the angel took them. And so, yeah, if you stick to what Joseph Smith tells you, you know he's talking about something else for you to study, rather than using science to find the geography in the Book of Mormon, to find cows in the archaeological record, to find coinage, oh dear God, etc., etc., etc. It is Hugh Nibley that is among the pioneers to cause problems. And before the church had a curriculum department that correlated the lessons, the church relied on Hugh Nibley to create their priesthood manuals. Not the Relief Society manuals. They let women do whatever they wanted. And they would eventually produce a Relief Society manual separate from an elders priesthood meeting or priesthood manual for lessons. But yeah, several of them were designed by Hugh Nibley alone. So the priesthood were getting taught by Hugh Nibley rather than the prophets of the church, which seems strange. Why are we being educated by Hugh Nibley and not the President David O. McKay? He was in the 50s, wasn't he? And so, yeah, there's the church not being led by inspiration, not wanting to go over the Joseph Smith papers, as they didn't really have them. They had the church history volumes, but they knew that Willard Richards had tampered with them. I refer to verse 1 of the 1838 history. Who is it that's militating against the church? Evil disposed and designing persons? Who? What's the name of the church? Are you sure? And so, yeah, the church has used Hugh Nibley, Apologetics, and others that they threaten, like Avraham Gileadi, who was involved in the Hebrew footnoting for the original version of the 1981 Quad, to conform and comply to the church and reject science and logic. And so Avraham is the tragic story of the abuse of the church being false, and to cover up the lies with violent threats, even murder at times, going back to Brigham Young's days. And so when you go through the Joseph Smith papers, you see the truth. You can distinguish as day from night which ones were put in by Brigham Young and his Danites and which ones were originally Joseph Smith's, because those are the original documents. They merged them all together as if they're one. No. And so Brigham Young has his take on his replacement of Joseph Smith's religion. And when the United States shut him down in 1876 with the Edmunds-Tucker Act, the church was in the apostasy period until about a decade or two into Heber J. Grant, when Heber J. Grant finally officially became the president of the church after a couple of decades of fooling Mormons into believing he was the president of the church, and reincorporated in 1923. And yeah, you probably heard about the Arizona woman who got a master's thesis talking about the secret meeting of scholars when Nibley was only about 10 years old, 11 years old. And B.H. Roberts was among that group. And they realized that this pivot that Heber J. Grant was doing, as he had published a new Doctrine and Covenants, and that's why the scholars were concerned. And there were Mormons who were concerned and left the church. And that one group was what became the FLDS Church with Warren Jeffs. And so what Heber J. Grant did was maliciously cover up church history that Brigham Young had lied about. And so what Exfo Nevermos are finding out when they do church history is this cover-up of Heber J. Grant and certain selected apostles and pre-apostles to rewrite church history to not associate with Brigham Young's doctrinal changes. Because remember, the church, or the United States of America, shut it down. They can no longer practice polygamy. So now the church is, that was Joseph. We don't practice polygamy. No, not us. And other things like Adam as Heavenly Father. Which, when you follow that through into the Gospels of literal history, and Mormons aren't disturbed by this, but nonetheless, yeah, those kinds of changes have branches and fruit that you can tell are corrupted. And this is what people are not getting, because they're not going to the Joseph Smith papers to see what Brigham Young changed. And so the Heber J. Grant scandal was to cover up Brigham Young, but then go back and impose a different lie on Joseph Smith now. And so thus the New York Times believes Joseph Smith is a fraud because nobody knew the learning of the Egyptians in the language of the Egyptians. They only know the Rosetta Stone, which is the learning of the Greeks in the language of the Egyptians. Greek, which is an alphabet imposed onto the pictogram ideograms of Egyptian hieratic and hieroglyphics. Or was it Demotic? They're wanting to sell me the Rosetta Stone translation stuff. Let's see. Demotic. Yeah, hieroglyphic and demotic, not hieratic. And so you need to know these basic facts, because otherwise Nelson's going to come out and tell you that they've translated the Book of Mormon into Egyptian. And you're going to get all excited thinking that it's going to be hieroglyphic, hieratic, or demotic script. Only to be disappointed, or you may never know, that it's Arabic. It was a guy living in Egypt who's Arabic, i.e. Islamic. Oh my God. So yeah, the church loves to prey on the stupidity of Mormons that they created to keep you fooled and to keep you ignorant about the truth. And so yeah, they now, after September 6th and that scandal, they refuse to let you study. They put out the Joseph Smith papers, but don't you dare study them. We've got the Book of Mormon, but don't you dare study the Book of Mormon. Because it proves the church is false. It is not Joseph's. And these are the traps that apologists have set up for the prophets to preach and threaten you at the pulpit of conference. So you have Benson, who says that, the Book of Mormon is true, or this whole church is a fraud. Well, it's not true as literal history Christian interpretation. So yes, your church is a fraud. But as Jewish, no, it's true. The prophecies have all happened, except for we're waiting now this election for 3rd Nephi chapter 7. Prophecy and Revelation, remember? And then Hinckley gets up and says, Joseph Smith literally saw and stood before the literal Jesus and Heavenly Father, not Adam. Otherwise, this work is a fraud. Yeah, because every single Mormon goes out and says, Joseph literally saw Jesus and Heavenly Father. Now go to it, read it, find Jesus. And then go to verse 19 for what Jesus tells Joseph. Remember, what's the first creed? It's these things that anybody with a brain can at least question. Even if you have no clue what a creed is, like I did as a kid, I knew enough to know that the text is telling me all of Christianity is wrong. That my born-again Christian peer, who was down the block on the other side when I was living in Corona, Tom Jones, who was born-again Christian, whose church was there at the corner of Corona High, across the street from our stake center where I had early morning seminary, but it had to close down because the massive cross fell on the parking lot. The wrath of Jesus smote the members down. Oh my God. So yeah, the kids toilet papered our stake center once. I guess they proved the church was false. I got hearted. I didn't know by who, but I thought it was an attack and a bullying abuse. Didn't realize she had a crush on me and spent hours with girlfriends. If you want a guy's attention, just go up and talk to him. Because otherwise the guy's going to be clueless. He doesn't get taught about the woman. All he knows is what he sees. And his interpretation as a boy. And so, yeah, I mean, dear God. So, I don't know, what else is there to explain? This church is a fraud, and apologetics are the weapon, the militant force. And then so you get Desnat and other Mormons that do crimes and such to prove the church is true. We're murdering you because we love you and trying to save you. Oh, yeah, that's that blood atonement thing, right?